You're listening to The Rich Life Revolution with me, Michelle Cooper. My mission is to empower you to step into your next level of wealthy. You'll hear all the deets, a little bit of inspiration, and real life takeaways so that you can create your own rich life revolution. Let's dig in. Hey there, welcome to episode 32 of the Rich Life Revolution podcast with my guest, Jane Johnston. We are talking all the deets, we're dropping all the tips for entrepreneurial success. So let's get started. So maybe you're an entrepreneur. Maybe you're an aspiring entrepreneur. And if you are, you've probably got questions. What would you love to ask a seasoned business owner? Well, in today's episode, you get your chance to get some answers. In this episode, you can listen in on my crazy, awesome, enlightening conversation with Jane Johnston, who is a number one realtor with Remax multiple times over and a very savvy entrepreneur. Her no-nonsense, no punches pulled approach to building a business comes with hard truths and smart tips, something every entrepreneur, every businesswoman can benefit from, wherever they're at in their rich life revolution. I first met Jane at an eWomen meeting. I thought, this is someone that I wanted to know. What I came to understand about Jane is that she puts her clients first. She was inspired to shift her career focus from teaching to real estate after a particularly poor encounter with a realtor. This, coupled with her background in administration and education, left her with a clear goal for her approach to selling houses: customer service above all else. This perspective, as well as a lot of hard work, led her to close 26 transactions in her first year. That's like 6 times more than most new realtors achieve. An amazing feat. And I am so grateful that she carved out some time of her very busy schedule to spend it with us on the Rich Life Revolution podcast. So grab your favorite coffee, settle in, and pick up on all the awesomeness we're throwing down. Hey, Jane, so good to connect with you today.
How are you doing, Michelle?
I am amazing. How are you?
I'm awesome.
So I am really excited to introduce you to my audience. You and I have known each other for maybe a couple of years now. We shared the stage at the eWomen event. Was it last year when we celebrated making it to 1 million?
2 years ago.
2 years ago. Oh my God. Isn't that crazy? Oh my God. Yeah. So we both were up there. You won the Made It to $1 Million award, and we were all recognized with a couple other people. That was an awesome experience. And so I really am interested in your journey to making it to 1 million. And you shared with me before we hit record a couple of things that happened along the way. And I think it's just so interesting to see how we navigate this success, this financial up level, right? As women business owners, as moms, wives, sisters, all of that. So perhaps you can share with the audience just a little bit of background, who you are, what you do, all of that, and then we can dive into this conversation.
Okay, so I came to real estate from teaching. I moved here from Ontario. I live in Victoria, BC. I got into real estate basically because I didn't have the best experience with a realtor, and I just felt like I could, if I tried, I could do better. I do have a background in administration, so that really helped me when I was starting. And then when I got into real estate, I rapidly started doing transactions quite quickly, actually. So within the first 4 months, I think I did 4, and then over the next following 12 months, I did 26 transactions. And so since then, I've been very consistent. And yeah, so I made it to 1 million a couple of years ago, and I've been consistently achieving much higher level. And one of the biggest differences was moving brokerages and just going to a place where I could create a network of people to send and receive referrals from. So that's been a huge change to my business.
Oh, nice. So would 26 transactions, would that be a lot for somebody's first year in real estate? Like, it sounds like a lot to me.
So usually a new person would do like 3 to 10 maybe. That would be good.
Right. So that was phenomenal then.
Mm-hmm.
And so you left teaching, you dove into real estate. That must have been maybe a little scary.
I didn't give up my teaching certificate until 2 years ago.
Oh, so you did both.
I didn't teach, but I didn't give it up because I was afraid.
Oh.
The scarcity mindset there working.
Right. So fear had a good firm hold on you then.
Well, I was a teacher for over 15 years and I did some pretty cool stuff. I worked with National Geographic. I worked at the university level. And then I came back and I was working at a local high school and local middle school. And I was doing teacher on-call work. So I didn't have my own classroom. And then my last job, I was doing remedial work with middle school students. And actually, I really liked that job. But while they were working on their work, I was working on my real estate coursework. So, yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And so you jumped in, got involved in real estate, obviously very successful. Clearly you saw a gap, like a need in probably customer service, knowing you would have been like the client experience, and obviously had some success. And so what happened for you? Like, what was your experience of this, what some could say quite rapid success?
So you're right about the client experience. That's all I was focused on. And so I came from, before I was a teacher, when I worked in the law office, they were very regimented. And what that made me realize when I started as a realtor was anything that I was going to say more than once, I was going to start creating templates for. So I created template letters for everything. And then I rapidly realized I was having trouble actually having a life. I was exhausted because part of it is like, when you have a new baby and you're up 24 hours because the baby you're afraid. Same thing with a new realtor. So then I started to realize, okay, I couldn't sustain this. And I had a part-time assistant and it was kind of like, I would say it was kind of like a salsa, like one step in, two steps back, cha-cha-cha, maybe.
Right.
Hire an assistant. No. Yes. No.
Give her a bunch of work. No, pull that back. Give some more work. No, pull that
back.
And
I think the main thing, the reason why people don't delegate is because they're afraid that the level of quality is not going to be the same. And it's true. However, if you go back to the system, you can fix the quality. So you go back to the checklist and you fix the checklist. So like coming onto the show just before I was chatting with you, I have a part-time assistant working as a full-time right now while my full-time's away. And I had to correct her on some stuff. And I just said, just take your time. Like, that's the main thing, is these people like repetitive activities, and just take your time so that you can be accurate. But it's the trust factor that realtors especially have trouble with. And the other thing was, and this is deep, is the belief that anybody would want to work with me. Why would anybody want to work with me? Because I was a new realtor. I felt an extreme responsibility for working with that person and having to pay their income. But now I realize just paying, like the income I pay my assistant is about 5% of what I earn. And she makes me 50% more. So it's totally worth it. But it takes belief. And then the other thing is once you start hiring people and that's a sense of responsibility, and then you start moving from running your business as an extension of yourself to running it as a business, is people perceive you differently. And so I had to deal with those perceptions. So some of my friends became uncomfortable with my success.
And so how does that show up in your life? Like, can you share a real life example of that? Because I think a lot of people go through this.
I just went to a reunion and this woman was just insistent on asking me what it was like to work with rich people. And I'm like, well, they put their pants on one leg at a time, just like anybody else. But I said, I don't go after wealthy people as clientele. I don't go after anybody based on their wealth. I serve people based on what their needs and wants are. And everybody deep down, once you know what their motivation is and what the issues are, if you can figure that out, then that's when you give the high level of service, because you're now being more intuitive in how you do your business.
Yeah, I found there were some real struggles. And I say this with the acknowledgement of the privilege of having $1 million business. But there were some things I had to deal with that I wasn't prepared for. And there were times where I actually regretted telling people that I had had this level of success, because the comments that I got sometimes, like just a little bit slanted, like a little must be nice, or, that kind of thing. And it was like, what? Like, huh? It just was off-putting. And then I did also find that sometimes there was in my social group or in my business kind of world group, there was almost like an expectation that I would pay, or that I would cover the bill, or I would do these things for people. And they had no actual understanding of the real financial situation. Sure, my business hit over $1 million in revenue, but that doesn't mean I have $1 million in the bank.
So I agree. So we moved into a house that didn't sell, one of my listings. And we ended up purchasing it. And it's a huge house. And nobody bought it because it's too big. It's an awkward house. So I'm in one little measly corner right now, like 10 by 10. And people would come up and they'd make comments about the house, about it being big. And I'm like, well, nobody else wanted this house, so we actually didn't pay a lot of money for it. It's just a big house. And so we had a contractor come in and work at our house during COVID. And so since he met me, he's become a realtor because he thinks it's easy. And he calls me up all the time. It's like, how do you do this? How do you do this? So there is that expectation that it's just easy, especially. And that, I have siblings. And when my mom passed away, I guess my mom used to lend them money. And so when my mom passed away, they asked me for money. And I'm like, they needed money to go to my mom's funeral. And I said, I will give you money once, but I don't want our relationship to be transactional. Like, I'm not your bank. So none of my friends have ever asked me for money, but I am generous to some people. Like, I once ordered 2 pizza ovens by mistake. I ordered it from Amazon and then it didn't show up, and I went to look at the order and I'm like, oh my God, you know what? I didn't order it. So then I reordered it, and then they both showed up at the same day. So I said to my friends, I have a group of 5 friends, 5 groups of families, and I'm like, you guys can share the other pizza oven, and then we'll use ours and when we have pizza parties. And they realize how expensive it is to have a pizza party, actually, because you're buying everything. But the point is, generally, I don't get asked for money. Nobody assumes I'm going to pay for things, but people do treat me differently. And they assume that once you reach a revenue of $1 million, that's it, that you don't have to work anymore.
For sure. And I know for me, in my business model, like I have a service-based business, right? The awkward part about reaching a 7-figure revenue point is that in my business, you need a lot of people to fulfill on those services. And it's a bit of a stretching point because you either have to manage those people, or you need to hire somebody to manage those people. So sure, the revenue grows substantially, but so do the costs for delivery of the service. And it's actually, I am less profitable at the 7-figure mark than I was at the mid 6-figure mark. Like I had more personal income back then than I do now. I'm thinking, because I don't know this for sure, and I don't know anybody who's gotten over this hump, but I'm thinking it's this kind of hump you have to get over to get to the other side of, where then maybe, your personal revenue kicks in a little bit more. I sure hope so at some point.
It's like when you get your first assistant, it costs you money and time. Like in real estate, we're always negotiating money and time. So every once in a while, I go through and do an ROI check and just see where am I spending my money, what is making me money, what's not making me money, and then cut away. And I actually did that just before COVID in January of that year. And I just cut because I spent a lot of money training new realtors. And one's gone off and done very well. He joined a different team. And so it actually physically, it hurts to put myself out there sometimes to, like it hurts my feelings. So now what I do with my newest mentee who thinks that it's easy is I have a 2-year agreement, because I'm not going to spend the time and money if they're not going to spend the time and money. And often what I give them a lot of tools up front. But if I'm going to invest, I'm going to have to get an ROI on them over time too.
Yeah. So you mentioned something there about, like it hurting your feelings. And I feel the same way about team members and clients, where I take it very personal if a team member is not working out. Or I remember like last year I had a couple of years, well, during COVID, like during 2020, at the end of the year, we let go of a team member because she said she was going to go off and, I don't know, do a music thing, be in a band or something like that. And then through the grapevine, I learned that she was actually working with 3 clients of ours that had left shortly after she left. So she wasn't actually doing this thing, she said. It hurt my feelings. I took it very personal. And maybe too personal, I don't know. But there was a point where I remember having a conversation with someone where I said, like, you know what, if she had just like been honest with me and told me this is what she's going to do, and, because she worked with these clients, I probably would have said yes, to be honest, because she did have a strong relationship with those clients. But because she lied, I felt like betrayal. So I can imagine when you put time into a new real estate agent and then they go and work for somebody else, it's like a little arrow in the heart.
Yeah, and it's nothing to do with money. It has, and same thing with a client, just a regular client. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with time. Actually, it has to do with your emotional investment in that person. And I don't know I do know male realtors feel the same way. And there are ways to ameliorate that so it doesn't happen to you, but it's a hard lesson to learn.
For sure. I actually had a friend of mine who's a trauma therapist, and she mentioned to me, I was talking to her on the weekend, and she mentioned to me that, like, I have a client who terminated their contract recently, and I was telling her how upset I was about it. Not because I don't care about the money. It's it's somebody that I considered a friend, and I've really supported their business growth. It's a new local business. I've sent a lot of people their way. I've really thought we were in alignment with our core values. But the way it all went down was really, really did not feel well. And I was talking to my friend about it, and she said, how many times do you think the average person gets fired in their lifetime? And I'm like, I don't know, a couple times maybe. I don't know. She's like, because that's what it's like for an entrepreneur losing a client. It's like getting fired. And I was like, oh. So she's like, that's the effect it has on your nervous system. That's the effect it has on your body, on your heart. It's like this getting fired, rejection kind of thing. And she's like, so don't just poo-poo it away kind of thing. Like, it has an effect. And because you care, it has a significant effect. And I was like, oh, that's so interesting to me. Right? I never thought about it like that.
So the first thing when I got into real estate, I said to all my friends, you don't have to use me as your realtor, because I didn't want to let them down if I didn't do a good job. But I also didn't want them to feel like they had to work with me because I was their realtor and friend. So what I wanted to do was just kind of let them off. And so over time, one for sure used me like 3 times. Like, many have used me. And I worked at a school, and I remember being in the residence at the school, and I would get all the junk email that would go to everybody, junk mail. And there was a realtor who was trying to kind of break into the school because she had a master's degree or a PhD or whatever. And so she had targeted the school. And I was like, oh, what about me? What about me? And I thought, you know what? I just got to let it go, Jane. Just let it go. And so, here I am 18 years later, and I'm like that school's realtor. People talk about me as being the school realtor. So, and it's because I think Mel Robbins talks about letting it go. Just let it go. So I've determined now, like, I can't, it's fine. It's fine. It still doesn't feel good, but it's fine. And that has nothing often to do with me. It has to do with them. And maybe some people are too close. Some people feel like you know too much about them and they feel vulnerable. And that's okay. And that's fine. And that's the same thing with money too. Like, I didn't wear an expensive watch to my reunion, my 35th reunion, because I didn't want people to go, oh, she's rich. I wore my little Garmin watch here because I was like, I don't want people to look at me and go, she's wealthy or whatever. And I deliberately dressed down to make people comfortable. I've never, because I'm so gorgeous and attractive, a big wink there. I deliberately don't dress very sexy. There are people in my business who are like selling sunset. And I know I lost a listing. And this woman's like, well, I don't think you could sell high-end home. And I'm like, what? she's like, well, I mean, I would trust you to sell my farm up in Chonican Lake, but I don't think you could sell this high-end home in Gordon Head. And I was like, oh, like, I don't think the realtor that this person had used previously wasn't ethical. And I'm like, well, I guess you need an unethical realtor. I don't know. Someone you don't like to work for you. Like, I don't know what her criteria were for choosing her realtor, but she just saw, like, we walked into a construction zone. She said, it's a construction zone. Don't wear high heels or anything. And I said, okay. So I show up I'm wearing pants, I'm wearing a sweater, and I'm wearing a very nice sweater. And I'm wearing a pair of sensible shoes. And she's like, well, I can see you like selling a farm, but not my house. It is so crazy.
Yeah, like, to me, that's crazy. If somebody showed up, okay, first of all, I will say I am a fan of selling sunset and the OC and all of that. Okay. $1 Million Listing is one of my favorite TV shows. So I love all that. And at the same time, if I did have something that was a construction zone and I told somebody, a realtor, to come by and they showed up in high heels and some fancy dress or whatever, I would probably think, you didn't listen to me. I told you this was a construction site and you're showing up like this, like that. But, it does highlight that people have an experience of someone, they have an experience of a situation based on their belief system. So you could have shown up for somebody else in the exact same situation and then been, oh, Jane gets me. She listened to what I said.
Yeah, it wasn't a reflection on me as a person, but I mean, I get it. You know how we grow our business? We grow our business by focusing on the customer experience. And then our clients refer us other clients. That's how we grow. So we're like that perfect piece of pizza in the pizzeria that goes viral.
Totally. Like, a lot of times people say to me, look, well, how did you get to 1 million? Like, what kind of ad strategy did you have? I'm like, I didn't have any. It's all referral. My whole business has been built on referral. And that blows people's minds often because that's a lot of referral. But I'm like, okay, it doesn't work out with every single client that comes into my business. There's some people will just end up figuring out that we're not a good fit. But for the people that it does work out for, they're more than happy to share their success story and to tell their people about us. So the first 25K of recurring monthly revenue in my business was built off of a BNI chapter. And that's how I learned about like networking, the power of consistency, showing up, and how to speak about my business. Like BNI was such a phenomenal experience for me. It taught me so much. I didn't know any of that stuff before I joined that organization.
So I used to run our chapter of eWomen Network in Victoria. And we would have people come in. So they were, I would call baby entrepreneurs, and they were moving from their desk job and going to an entrepreneurial position. And so just taking the leap. And it was the same cha-cha-cha happening. So 1 step forward, 2 steps back. And I found some people were searching for what they were going to sell. Some people had a really firm idea. But the people who did well were the people who were consistent over time and kept showing up, having the consistent messaging, following up, giving good service, and not changing their focus all the time. I've had a few people who I'm like, you're what? What are you selling now? Like, what are you doing? And and I'm thinking, just stick with it. Stick with it. But they get bored and they're ready to move on. So that's not how you make it to 1 million.
It is not. It is not. And it's also not an overnight success. I always tell people like it was like a 10-year overnight success story, right? It took me 10 years to get to that point. And then I had to look at, okay, well, whatever I've been doing got me here. What's going to get me to my next goal? And so you mentioned eWomen Network. We were both members of that organization. We're both platinum members. And whether it's eWomen, BNI, or whatever it is that you're doing to kind of get yourself in front of other people, such an incredibly powerful resource to tap into. Did that really help you in your real estate business?
So I went through as a managing director, and that was a really good decision to make because so I was 6 years in the business, and then they kind of tweaked what I was doing. I actually didn't go to what they call high performance training until about a year and a half in, and they told me if you don't come, you're not going to still be a managing director. I was like, okay. And then I went, and they work on a lot of scripting with you in selling and telling you what's the value. And then I kind of had an aha. And I think I had already made executive managing director. I don't know, but I find it incredibly easy to sell things I like and figure out what the advantage is for those people to come. And so we had a really strong chapter because there was a lot of belief on my part that we were doing the right thing. It helped me learn to speak my client's love language, I guess would be a good word. Like start to like, hey, do you know, I've got people that would love to meet you. Would you like to come to a meeting and be introduced to somebody who could really use your service? And that just kind of like, all of a sudden I realized like, oh, I do that with houses all the time. And I use the skill I learned in eWomen Network in selling and vice versa. And it just took me to the next level. So definitely doing that. And I still show up consistently because I think that everybody else just falls away. And so if you look at, and I figured this out in about, so I got in 2006, and then we started to go through a decline in about 2009. And I realized that if I just keep going, that all these other people are just going to fall away, and there's going to be a core group of people. And it's maybe like out of 1,600 realtors, maybe like 200, then I've got this in the bag.
It's a really great strategy and really great self-awareness.
Imagine like for you too, right? Like you're going through a tough time, you feel like giving up, and then you just decide, okay, I'm going to be in this for the long game. Because I did lots of exciting things before I got into real estate as a teacher, and before that I traveled, and so I just really, I said to my husband, we can either, like if I choose real estate, we have to stay in Victoria and we're going to be focused just on Victoria. Or if we move, then we could use my teaching degree and we could live all over the world. So it was like one or the other.
Yeah. And, I know, like, I agree. Consistency is key. And that really showing up is how you build your business. My business went through a little bit of a growing pains, maybe call it. And I really had to spend time on developing team so that it could grow in the future, right? Without me juggling all the balls and doing all the things. That took me away from showing up, took me away from speaking. It took me away from showing up to networking events. And then the repercussions of that come at the back end of that, right? Like, oh, the leads dry up. I'm not the first person on the tip of their finger when they think about counting or bookkeeping, right? And so I realized that earlier this year, and I'm like, okay, hang on. I have to prioritize this again, right? And so it's like, okay, tap back into my networks. Where are the people that I love to hang out with? Because you got to love the people. If you're going to show up to a networking event at 6:00 at night when you're starving to death and all you want to do is sit down and eat dinner and watch $1 Million Listing on Netflix, it's got to be people you want to hang out with, right?
If you're going to give up $1 Million Listing, for sure.
Right. So it's like, who are the people I love? One of the groups I love is the Victoria chapter of eWomen. But yeah, it's choices that we make, but consistency is key because it's like the lag effect, right? Like if I stop doing this now, the lag effect at some point down the road is your leads are going to dry up and business slows down.
So the average hump cycle for a realtor is 2 months. So it's 6 times a year. And they'll get busy, and then the leads will dry up, and then they'll get busy. So one thing we're always focused on is following up. We actually brought in a new system this past year just to ensure that we're not missing any leads. And actually today I was talking to this lady, and she's like, how'd you get my number? And I'm like, well, you're in my spreadsheet, and I have to follow up with you. And so I'm just letting you know. And she's like, I'm okay. Like, you don't need to follow up with me. I've already got a realtor. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And of course, it's a funny thing, real estate, because people like think it's a fine line between harassing somebody and attending to their needs. And if you are too attentive, they feel you're harassing them. And if you're inattentive, they feel you're ignoring them. So you really came up with a strategy to kind of just nudge people every couple of months, just so that we would stay in touch and not be too overwhelming. But the point is to keep the leads consistent. And then we're doing a client appreciation event. So we invite people, we want to see them face to face. So, and that is like a no pressure, we're giving back to you. And then we do a lot of giving back to the community. I think that's very important. So I'm on Habitat for Humanity board, and I'm part of the Victoria Hospital Foundation fundraising committee. And so just always trying to like give back and not sell, provide service.
Yeah, my company, we give 1% of our revenue to causes and initiatives that our clients and team members support or are important to them. And that's always interesting when clients understand that, because we'll share, like maybe somebody's preferred charity is dog rescue. And so, we find something that is either in their town or something that they really love supporting. And then they're like, oh, wow. Because for me, what I believe is that money is meant to circulate. It's not meant to like collect. Like it's good to pool some money, but it's also meant to circulate. And so if we can contribute to money circulating for our clients, because they're giving money to us, we give it to somebody else and it keeps moving around, then we're achieving one of our missions in the world. So,
Which is why bartering doesn't go over well.
no, they should not. Like I've had people say, oh, well, I'll do this for you if you'll do my taxes. It's like, no, it's just not a fair exchange. And it also, there's a value placed on that, whatever it is, whether it's like doing somebody's taxes or buying a house or whatever it is, buying a candle, it doesn't matter. There's a value placed on it, and not everybody's values line up. So it never works.
Yeah. So it's interesting you say that, because I have this new realtor who I'm working with. And so I pay her to be a part-time assistant as one job, and then she works as a realtor as another job. So we have separated the two on purpose, because it's cash flow that's the killer when you're an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. Like that's what I talk about all the time, right? Like profitability is fine, whatever, but like you got to understand your cash flow.
Yeah. So it's funny. I was like, I think we give away 3%. I never really looked at it as a percentage.
You should do that because it matters and it's important.
We talk about like we give away $100 per transaction. So that goes to the Children's Miracle Network, and then which goes to the BC Children's Hospital Foundation. And then we give to the Victoria Hospital Foundation. And then some of my clients have, like, because I was former PE teacher, I'm into supporting my clients' kids in sport. So I've had a friend of mine who I went to university with 20 years ago ask me for money for his hockey team. And I'm like, I haven't seen you in 20 years.
Yeah. Well, I think, youth athletics is really important. I coached kids for many years in competitive sports, and it's a good way for kids to stay out of trouble, but also to build character, right? Stamina, diligence, grit, all that stuff. So I love
What sport was that?
Roller derby.
Yeah. I coached speed skating.
Oh, like speed ice skating?
Yeah. So we had some roller derby women come, and it was so funny because they were like, got their elbows out, and they were quite good skaters.
Yeah. Well, it's a different skill, right?
Yeah, it was great. They were great. They just wanted to see how it felt. The skates are weird, of course, but they certainly had the push. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I played competitive roller derby for 10 years and coached kids and all that stuff. So it was a lot of fun. It was actually the first place that I learned about mindset was sports. My coach gave me a book called Mind Gym. I don't even know who the author is, but that was like, I was like, what? What do you mean? Your body reacts to what you envision the same as it does to actually doing it. Like that just blew my mind. I was like, that's crazy awesome. So that kicked off my whole personal development journey, to be honest.
So I coached the little kids, and I would talk about like just finding the rhythm and being consistent. And then I remember just doing a commentary on a race. And as they were going around, I was like, okay, now here's where the rubber hits the road here. You can see they're starting to get the pain, and they got to push through it and just keep going. And that's exactly what being an entrepreneur is like.
Oh my God, that is such a good analogy. So in roller derby, there's some skills testing before you can actually play in a game. One of the skills is it's changed now, it's gone up, but it used to, when I played, it was called 25 and 5. You had to do 25 laps of the track in 5 minutes. When you're just learning, that's really hard to do. But you also have to understand, so the track in roller derby is oval, but there's a sweet spot that is actually round, like you would know. And so you need to hit that sweet spot to cut off the excess seconds almost, right? Because at that point, every second counts. And then getting into the flow with your foot and your arms so that everything's moving like as a machine. And once you're in it, you feel you're in it. right? You're like, I nailed this. But if you're not in it, you're like, I can't do this. I am dying right now. Right?
Because you learn to push when you're going around the circle so you can glide when you're going through the straighter part. And then that's what speed skating is like. So then when you see a newbie, they're always pushing on the straight part and then they glide around the corner. When you're going around the hard part, which is the corner, and you're digging in and pushing away, that lets you go. And all of a sudden you take off.
And that is such an analogy for entrepreneurship. Dig in on the hard part. Dig in so you can glide in the straightaway. So good. Thank you so much, Jane. This was amazing. Just really great gold nuggets dropped here. I am so appreciative of you. And it's just amazing that I get to call you a friend and, somebody that I really value, your opinion, your outlook, and everything. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. And I notice we both have the same word behind our heads.
We do. Awesome.
Thankful for you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. As I mentioned in the recording, Jane and I shared the stage at an eWoman event where we were acknowledged for making it to $1 million in our business. What I loved that Jane shared is the piece around staying consistent. I've said before that my business is a 10-year overnight success, and Jane echoes this concept. Despite her quick vault to running $1 million company, no one wakes up suddenly victorious. Pitfalls and slumps dog us at every stage of the way, and it's easy to tap out when a big one looms up. We all face them. We got to have good people in our corner. We got to invest in the right advice, and we have to remain consistent in our goal. Your message and your dedication to the work is very important. It is the only way you come out on top, whether that top happens in a year or 20 years. Jane cites that many baby entrepreneurs, as she has seen over the years, who seem to be selling something new at every single networking event. If growing pains and steep climbs are inevitable, it stands to reason that dramatically switching your goalposts at every few months will simply throw additional challenges in your path. Figuring out how to stay the course and focus on the small wins until the big wins come is the key to achieving your dream career or your dream business. I would love to hear what your gold nugget was, what you are taking away from this episode. Please feel free to share this on social media, tag me in your comments, hit me up in my DMs, and subscribe to the podcast if you're not already on your favorite podcast listening platform.
Thanks for hanging out with me. I hope you got at least one gold nugget today. Be sure to grab your copy of the Rich Life Revolution workbook to help you set the foundation for your next level of wealthy. Get it now at richliferevolution.ca, and I'll see you later.